Hello, so this is going to be a video on something I've talked about before on this channel, but it's worth coming back to because it's always interesting stuff. Uranium dinnerware. Now, it's not as exciting as it sounds, but this is Fiestaware. This is definitely the more exciting of the two. And this is uranium glass. Now, uranium glass, you might even have a load of this in your house and not even know about it. The Fiestaware is a bit less likely because it's quite a vintage thing, but uranium glass was basically, prior to discovery of nuclear power and nuclear bombs, uranium was kind of one of those things you could put it in stuff, but it didn't really have much use. You'll see a similar thing with thorium, actually, a bit like thorium lamp mantles and everything like that. There were certain properties it had that were completely unrelated to the nuclear thing that people liked about it. And uranium, obviously, when the whole thing about we can make bombs or power out of this, uranium became a lot more sought after and it wasn't used in stuff like this anymore. So uranium glass or Vaseline glass looks pretty boring to the regular human eye. It looks a bit green. The reason it was so popular, under UV lighting and certain types of light, it basically glows. Now hopefully the camera shows that alright. Oh, I set off one of the Geiger counter's alarms there. So let's put this on a mode where it doesn't actually have an alarm. There we go. Yep, that's because the Fiestaware is down there. But anyway, so uranium glass, hopefully you can see it if I hold the light there. It has a glow to it under UV, so it looks really pretty. And that's weirdly one of the things that uranium was really popular for. Uranium-based glass, sort of tableware and jewellery, and mixing in with other things to make the paint look more bright and sort of vibrant. And that's the Fiestaware. So Fiestaware was basically made by, was it the Homer? It says Fiestaware on there, Fiesta USA, but I think it was Homer Laughlin or something the company was called. It says HLZ, I think it's something like Homer Laughlin Company. And they made loads and loads of tableware, you know, like plates, quite Art Deco plates, you know, cups or things like that. But one particular type of Fiestaware was called radioactive red. Now I don't know if that's its official name, but it's this type. It's actually more of an orange than the red. The reason this has since become very famous, it's very radioactive for what it is. Now, it's not radioactive in, like, radium levels are scary. It was just simply because when they made the paint glaze, they found if you put uranium oxide in it, you know, uranium powder, mixed it in with the paint, it would give it a really nice gloss and sort of bright colour finish. You know, it's a very bright orange. So let's talk about the radioactivity of these, because I'm sure this is why people are interested. So let's first do this one because it's not as exciting, because the uranium content in this is very, very low. So according to this Geiger counter, if I put this on, I'll put it on the count per minute function. If I put that there, you can probably hear, it's more than background, but it's not very exciting. It's about 50 CPM, according to that. It might jump up a little bit in a minute. But yeah, it's not very exciting. The thing is with uranium glass, you know, if you wanted a Geiger check source, don't get uranium glass. A Geiger will register it, but not very much. If we use this one, this is going to give more of an interesting example. So yeah, if I put the this one here, as you can see, it's a bit higher than background, not very much. If I put this bottom bit of it with the most glass there directly on the GM tube, do we get a higher reading? Yeah, a little bit higher, look. It's suddenly registered as high, but you have to have the highest concentration of the glass right against the GM tube, so yeah, uranium glass stuff isn't very good for background. If I was to use that with this one, I don't think it's even going to show above background. So let's get this one on here, the Chinese Geiger counter, if it will actually display the dose, because at the moment it's just showing ... which is a bit strange, but there we go. So yeah, as you can see, background levels of radiation. This does nothing to something like that. And with the Bereg, you can probably hear it chirps a bit faster than background, but not all that interesting. So the interesting one then is the Fiestaware, because Fiestaware has a much higher uranium content in it. Now, this wasn't part of the radioactive quackery period, it was just because uranium was pretty. Because it wasn't one of those things of putting radium and uranium and thorium and everything, because surely that's good for you, when in reality, you know, it just gives you cancer. This was something far more interesting. So, as this one beeps, and it's on like 40 odd counts per minute, now let's put this against it. And when the display slowly updates on this one, you'll probably see that it goes to quite a big number that's higher. It's on 242 CPM, but I'll turn this one off for now because this is a much slower updating display than the this one. So let's go to this one, put this on here, and as you can see, we've immediately gone to sort of much crazier radiation levels. Look, we're into the thousands of counts per minute. Now, if you're measuring something like Fiestaware, it is much better to do it in the CPM kind of base mode, in all honesty. The reason being that basically it's not very scarily sort of hot radioactive sources, but it is sort of active, so you know, it's better to always measure this with a Geiger measuring counts per second or counts per minute, not dose equivalent, because if it's dose equivalent on something like cesium, this is nowhere near as hot as cesium-137, hence why I'm not scared to hold it in my hand. I wouldn't eat out of it. So now let's see what this one does. So it has the 0.20 background. Let's put this on the dish like that, and let's see how much more it shows than background radiation. And as you can see, it is climbing up slightly there. Not loads, but it is climbing up. If you leave it on here for a moment, let's say I put it on like this, that might come out of the biggest dose equivalent because the beta window is being directly exposed to the uranium oxide paint. And as you can see, it's definitely above background. That would be worrying if you didn't know what the source was coming from. And now this is the fun one I find, the Bereg, because the Bereg, when it's in green, that means it's safe background levels of radiation. When it's in yellow, that means, something's a bit up, but it doesn't mean it's that bad. Red means that's above background. Put this near it. So yeah, there we go. Fiestaware and uranium glass, interesting things, but again, not really scary. Fiestaware, though, is one of those things that if you had a large amount of it in your house, I'd be a bit careful about where you stored it, and I certainly wouldn't want to eat off of Fiestaware. I think the danger was with Fiestaware, you know, the main danger was if you had acidic foods or drinks in the mugs and, you know, plates and everything, you could take the glaze off over time and then you'd be ingesting uranium, something I really would not advise you do. But yeah, when it comes to sort of activity of it, Fiestaware, if you can get it cheaply, because sadly it's quite sought after for the really big dishes and stuff, but sometimes you can get bowls like this in good condition, you know, for like, especially in the States, like $20 to $30 sort of price. This was about £50 when I paid for the import duties and everything else on it, but I did really want a full bit of Fiestaware, not, you know, like a little scrap of Fiestaware. Yeah, Fiestaware is a good Geiger check source, just because in terms of the beta and gamma it gives off, it will actually register. I'm assuming no alpha really comes off of this because of the fact that it's obviously in a glaze, which is going to stop most of the alpha particles. But it gives off beta and gamma. Basically, this is similar to having pitch blende samples. It's the same sort of thing, it's just raw uranium, essentially. But what they did is essentially had it smashed up into a powder, and then the powder was mixed in a certain ratio with paint, just to make it look pretty. Not too far off, you know, radium paints, but obviously radium paint is far hotter, because stuff like undark paint supposedly gives off about 50 millirontgen per hour equivalent of gamma rays for 1 gram of undark paint. So yeah. Anyway, not as active as that, but as you can see, certainly will make your Geiger counter sing if you put it near it. So it's good as a check source. If you want to find out if you've got a Geiger counter that measures background levels of radiation, is it working? Fiestaware certainly does that, and I find it's just one of those really cool old curiosities. I'd wash your hands after handling it, but as said, Fiestaware is a much safer check source than, say, than radium diols or something like that, because I can't see this flaking everywhere, and it's just uranium based. I'd say this is actually safer than pitch blende, because I assume in the glaze it's not going to give off radon gas, whereas pitch blende obviously can belch out radon if you've got it in a sealed room, so that's something to bear in mind. But yeah, uranium glass and Fiestaware. Two very interesting things of when people thought it was a good idea just to randomly mix radioactive elements into plates and stuff like that.